Okay, Sarah said, is Jeff in yet? Did he get in?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Before we start this meeting off, if I could get approval of our September 17th working group meeting minutes.
So move.
Can I get a second from you, Councilman Fusco? Oh,
He was there and disappeared. I don't know if he keeps losing signal.
oh, here he comes.
Hello, Madam Chair.
Hi, can I get a second from you on approval of our previous meeting minutes from the working group?
Yes, second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Before we start introductions, I just want to thank you, Brad, for stepping in for me the last few meetings with the passing of my dad, and I really appreciate you for stepping in for me.
My pleasure.
So some of my questions may be redundant. They may be things that Brad and Jeff have already went over. So I apologize if that does happen. If we could start with introductions as to who all is on this call in your department, if we could. We start with Brian. Can you unmute, Brian? I think you're muted, Steve. Let's see.
All right, I'll do it this way.
There
How
you
about
go.
that? All right, the space bar's not working. Brian Armstead, I'm Sergeant in training. Also with me in the room is Sergeant Eric Wood from training, but he can't get his computer to work, so he's just monitoring on mine.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Okay, Lieutenant Fight.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant Fight, Officer of Professional Standards and Accountability, and Commander of the Background and Recruitment Unit.
All right. And who am I missing here? Oh, Chris, I don't want to kill your name, so I'll let you introduce yourself.
That's okay. Captain Beitzel, Chris Beitzel, Platoon 5 Patrol Commander. I'm also the Zone 2 Commander. So yeah, that's me.
And then I have someone else, but I can't really tell who that may be. Is that Lieutenant Forney, maybe?
Well, Lieutenant Forney couldn't make it. It's Captain McCosey. I'm working in Services Subdivision and oversee training.
Oh, okay.
Forney was unable to make it tonight. So
Okay.
I'm running along.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here this evening, and we will try not to keep you long. We do have a couple action items that I'd like us to dive into if we could. And if this is your wheelhouse, you could just jump in and give us some oversight and overview of that. I first want to start with hiring practices and procedures. I do know one of the working groups are touched on a little bit, but with us in this committee, we're dealing specifically with personnel and culture. I thought it was very important that we go over the hiring practices and procedures. So I don't know if that's something that Lieutenant Fight could go over, if we could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Hiring practices are, we do have some internal procedures that we adhere to that through the Ohio Collaborative about hiring and recruiting. We also maintain the requirements of the civil service rules of the city of Akron and oversight of HR when we hire. Hiring is a function of HR. The police department assists in the hiring process by going out and doing recruiting. And then once the recruiting and the testing has been completed, testing phase, we do background on the applicants for the position. And again, it's a collaborative with HR, and we get them to the point where we can put them in a police academy. I can get a little bit more specific if you want me to.
Yeah, I do, if you could.
Okay, you want to start when there's a need to hire, what we do?
Yeah, so we can start from the very beginning of the hiring process with when we start at testing.
Okay, I'll take it one step further. Once we find there's a need to hire police officers,
Okay,
we always have to make sure there's money to hire and get the approval from the city to do that hiring. Once that is established, we meet with HR, and HR will start a plan on which vendors they're going to use for the battery of testing. Decisions made on that. They will post a test, the upcoming police test, which goes out through social media, newspapers, on the city's HR employment board, and then we start a recruiting phase. We try to get recruiters that are exemplary officers that have a good good relationship with the community, and we like to try to get a diverse group, as diverse as we can. We want to be inclusive in our recruiters also. We go out and we recruit for the 6 to 8 weeks prior to the written test. Actually, we were recruiting all the time. We recruit not just through our recruiting. We have community relations. Anytime an officer in community relations goes to an event, those when they're out with the public, they're setting an example which young people tend to gravitate to, that may aspire to be a police officer. As a matter of fact, in our last class, a couple of our recruits gravitated towards our SROs in the schools, and they said they were instrumental in getting them to take the test and become police officers. But as we recruit, we try to get down on the street level, out into the community, and involve the churches, involve the city council. We go to businesses. We go to the community organizations, and we ask for their help. It's a community and collaborative effort to get police officers, and we ask for the help of the community every time we do recruit. Once that phase is over, well, during that phase, we provide open houses where we try to educate the potential applicants on the testing phase, what to expect through the testing and background process. We do that. We usually do that at least twice during the process. We visit police academies in the area. They're open police academies. PATA has open academies, and they also have academies that are held in police departments where they actually have their own hirees, like Cleveland runs one, we run one. But we'll go to Kent State, Akron U, and we'll recruit out of those locations in their open police academies. We will go to fraternities, colleges, sororities. We bring on anybody that is willing to help us recruit a inclusive candidate. And once the testing phase comes up, they are given a multiple test. In the past few years, there's been a multiple choice test that's given by HR, by the vendor. I mentioned the vendor earlier, by the vendor they've chosen. Once that written test is complete, the test is scored. Those that pass the test will then be invited to a physical fitness testing, which we test their ability to do push-ups, sit-ups, and a 1.5 mile run. which mirrors what OPATA, which is the Ohio Police Officer Training Academy, requires. The candidates that get successfully past that will go to the background phase. Well, we have background investigators that do complete comprehensive backgrounds on the individuals that are on the eligibility list. Also, the candidates will have to go through, the applicants will have to go through a polygraph test, the background phase, a meeting with the command staff. If they're successful and they're given a conditional job offer, they will be sent for psychological testing, medical testing, and then sent off to the academy. That's a basic overview of the hiring process.
In that hiring process, once you hire someone, what's the new hire probationary period?
That was changed in 2019. It is now 365 days from the time of appointment.
Okay. During that probationary period, if an officer, a new hire, a new recruit has an issue, for example, alcoholism or addiction, are they given an opportunity to seek counseling or treatment, or is it an automatic termination?
That would be up to the command staff. If there's an incident where they broke the law under probation, most typically they'll be dismissed. If it's just a personal problem they're going through, we're going to work through that problem and offer them employee assistance or whatever they need to retain that officer. We don't want to lose somebody we've spent a lot of money on training. So, but if it becomes a criminal issue, most likely they're going to be dismissed.
Right. So as I look at 2B on here with the psychological and the comp exam, where does that fall in the process, the hiring process after you take the test? Are they doing the psychological evaluations during the HR background check, or is that later in the process?
Okay, that's a good question. After the background process is complete and the applicant meets with the command staff, the command staff, if they want to hire that applicant, will give what's called a conditional job offer. Conditional job offer allows that person to move on to the final phases, which is the psychological exam and the medical exam.
Okay. Bear with me, I got all kind of notes over here, you guys. I'm sorry. So there's a thing that that I've talked to a lot of officers prior to having this meeting, just to sort of get a feel of personnel in the hiring process, just so I'm making sure that I'm touching on everything, so I don't have to keep asking you guys the same questions. You guys have a process called Rule 3. Can you explain that to me?
Sure, that is a civil service process where when you establish an eligibility list is a list where we can actually hire from. We call it a police eligibility list. If you were going to be a safety communication technician, it'd be a safety communication technician eligibility list or fire eligibility list. People are ranked on that eligibility list. And civil service requires, if you're going to, you have to hire the highest rank, the highest, and you have to look at the top 3 rankings when you make a selection. So if you're ranked number 1 and we have an open position, we got to look at rank number 1, 2, and 3. And we have to take one person from those ranks. Now there can be ties in those ranks. So you could look at more than just 3 people. You could look at 5, 10, 12 people if there's ties in those ranks. So that's basically the Rule 3. So we're held to hiring 1 out of the 3 ranks for each position that we fill of the highest rank.
So I'm trying to think of a good example. So say myself, Brad, and Jeff, we all score a 80% on the exam. You guys have to choose between the three of us, which one would be hired?
No, actually, if you guys score all the same on the exam, you would be ranked, say, number one. And then we'd have to look at the 79%.
Okay,
So,
okay,
okay.
okay, got it. Okay, that makes a lot more sense to me because I was thinking, so all three of us have an 80 and now only one of us get the job. That seemed a little off to me.
No, that, and if just because we take, say we did take you and we didn't take the other two and we looked at rank 79 and 78 below you, those two are, in the next round, those two will move down and we'll take a look at them again. It rolls.
Okay,
But after you're passed for three rounds, you can be removed from the list.
oh,
It gets complicated.
Madam Chair.
And
Yes,
HR can explain it the way it probably should be.
okay, Councilman McKittrick?
I just wanted to interject, if you'll remember what is going to go before the voters as far as the charter, that particular aspect is one of the changes where they're increasing that number.
Okay, okay.
So they would be able to expand what they're looking at because I know from experience in the past, the three candidates made it extremely difficult. And so that's the purpose why the voters are going to consider this.
A charter change.
Yes.
It would be appreciated.
Okay, awesome. After your, during the hiring process, how are the partners paired up? How do you guys pair someone up with someone? Say you want to put Armstead with Wood. How do you figure out who's going to be partners with each other in that process?
That will be a question that would be better answered by training and maybe Captain Beitzel, because I think training talks to the shift commanders and they make those decisions. Can training buzz in?
So what we did was we got a list of potential training officers, the officers who would be training the recruits from each of the shift commanders. As the training staff, we spent all the time with the recruits while they're in the academy. So we get a good feel for what their strengths and weaknesses are. And we worked with each shift commander to pair them up with somebody we thought that would fit their individual strengths and weaknesses on that shift. We set out a plan to where they would be with an FTO for about 10 weeks, and then they would switch so that they got a different FTO. This gives the shift commanders and the training staff a different perspective. We have some FTOs who might be a little bit more stringent in their grading practices than others. So switching the recruits allows us to get a better baseline of their scoring. So that's how they're paired up with an FTO.
Okay. So has there ever been any consideration of pairing people up based off of maybe, since we're talking about culture as well in this, cultural backgrounds? Like, for instance, I'm from a pretty rough neighborhood, grew up there, family still lives there. But my experience may not be the same as someone who grew up in the rural parts of a community. Has there ever been any thought process to maybe pairing them up, because now they're able to learn some different aspects from each other's lives and backgrounds?
One of the things we did take into consideration was their personal background, but not as much their culture. We had recruits from all walks of life in this last academy. We had some very, very young recruits who had very little life experience outside of high school. They had nothing. So we had to find people whose not only their personality, but what we knew of their FTO's background, and to try and bring out the best in that recruit. So we didn't target culturally things. We targeted the officer that we thought could bring out those strengths that we needed to see a little bit more, or even control some of those characteristics that the rookie might be exhibiting.
Okay, okay. Councilman Fusco or Councilman McKittrick, do you guys have any questions? I feel like I'm like hijacking the whole entire meeting.
I just had a couple quick questions in regard to the hiring process. The last class, how many of the recruits may have had training from OPATA, had already had their certification before they went through our academy? Do we know?
Brad, I don't have those exact numbers, but there was several officers that were hired that were OPATA certified already. We sent them back through our academy. We brought in, we had an officer that came from, was it Kansas City, who was a previous officer, one from Georgia, who was a previous officer, and some that just recently graduated from OPATA classes or academies locally.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Fusco, do you have any questions? Oh, you're still on mute.
I will, I'll have some comments a little later in reference to recruiting, much more so than after they're hired. So just a few brief comments in reference to that. And I'll update you on that whenever that's appropriate.
Okay, okay. So when we talk about training, now that the academy is back in-house, can you explain the difference between when they were outside and now they're inside, and what the process is and what's different now that they're back in-house?
Captain McCosey, you want us to take that one?
Sure. It's good to talk about that part of it, because one of the things we recognized in the training was that when we have our own academy, we have the opportunity during each individual section of the academy, each topic area, not only to teach them what OPATA requires, which is very minimal, and more of a glossing over of the issue, whatever that skill set is, but we also have the opportunity to talk about what our procedures are, what local ordinances are that apply to that particular situation, and include a discussion of community standards, what's expected in the community when we go to these types of calls, whatever type of call it is. So within each one of these topic areas, we can cover OPATA and what's required here procedurally and rules and regs wise, and what the community standard is, which makes a huge difference. In addition, the outside academies that we're talking about, they're for-profit organization. They're there to provide basic training, and that's it. They don't have any stake in the outcome really. They take the money and they provide the training, and then they send them off to take the test. For us, we have a vested interest in each and every one of these people to not only get them through the training, but make sure they actually understand it, because at the end of it, they're going to be somebody's partner and they're going to work here. And when we send them out into the community, we want them to understand what's expected of them and what we want them to do from the start. So the inside academy, our in-house academy, allows us that advantage to teach them everything about Akron, and to also really build a bond with Akron, because when we had these folks that were going to Kent or Akron or wherever, the training was lesser. We didn't do it. They didn't get any of the extra that we do, but beyond that, they didn't know anybody. They didn't have any connection to Akron. So while we have this open testing process where applicants can come from all over and take the test, and we hire them in, they didn't live here, they haven't moved here, they hit the street, they don't even know each other because they went to different academies. So they have no connection to Akron at all. And what you have from that is now you have the stranger walking into the academy class that knows nobody, or into the roll call room that knows nobody in the room. They don't know anybody in the community. And all they had was a phone conversation with their FTO, which is not the best situation. Having it in-house, they not only are exposed to Akron officers, many of the instructors come in from the patrol shifts, and they can tell them about a call they had last night that applies to the subject matter they're learning today. So it's current, real knowledge, and they get to know each other within the group, and they get to know some of the other Akron officers along the way. And at the end of that 6-month period, when they hit the street, when they walk into that roll call room, they know other people there. And they've already started to build that bond with Akron and come to appreciate what Akron is. So it's a very deep connection there, and it makes a huge difference. And I think that even our test scores, if that's any indicator, the test scores for this group with 45 people there, and we averaged a 92. And I'm reasonably confident that that was not the average in the groups that we had coming through from other academies.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just if it's okay with the chair, I'd like to ask.
Oh, yes, go ahead. Mhm.
Thank you, Tara. Thanks. How long have we had it? Because I remember supporting, the construction and building the thing, if you will, the training bureau. How long have we had it now? It's been what, 5-6 years or so?
I don't have the exact dates. We took on the campus up there. It sounds about right, several years ago, and moved our training bureau up there. And it's an excellent facility for what we're using right now. We can improve it. We're looking to improve it over time, but yeah, we've had about 5 or 6 years. It's just the first opportunity we've had to actually have our full academy there.
Good. Well, I think we, what's the difference in cost? And like I said, I supported, just for the record, I did support, having our own, because I believe in all the benefits that you had said, and doing, the Akron way. I've heard that phrase before, and I'm very supportive of it. And this, I don't know if this is an appropriate time or not, to bring up the recruitment side. And if you want me to, I can go with that, or if there's more questions on the training and so on and so forth. And I think that what happens on the training, on the recruitment side is, and I like to hear the SROs can be instrumental, because this goes to the core of what we talked about this at the last meeting, Tara. President Somerville and I had some conversations with some of the faith-based community, with Akron Public Schools, with the police department, in reference to the possibility of creating a pathway and starting this recruitment process. Because what we do is, a police officer isn't permitted to be hired until the age of 21. We took care of the back end, which was a great idea, 35 to 40. But I think what we should do is consider the front end and try to recruit earlier in, as opposed to waiting until they're 21. And so I think if we create a pathway, and we talked about this last time, I'd love to hear more input from everyone. For everyone who's been at the last meeting, just to let you know, I've had a couple conversations with human resources, and they're interested in having more. So hopefully we'll have something to report back at the next committee meeting. But what this would look like is during those 3 years between, high school and age 21, what we could possibly do is bring them into the city and dubbed, have a name for this program, and it doesn't have to stop at policing. It could go also into fire, etc. But I believe right now there's going to be a big demand for police. So what we would do is start them in with the city of Akron, and whenever someone would come and apply, they would come and say, look, hey, I want to get into this program. And so it would be structured so that they would learn the Akron way, if you will. They would start out, maybe the example, I don't know, but their first year, they could go into Recreation Bureau as a seasonal part-time while they're going to school. And they could, you're interacting with people every day. Okay, the next year, they would be at the 311 call center, okay, as a seasonal perhaps. And there's a limited amount of phones there that are available, but I believe this could be something that we could structure. You're on the front line at the 311 call center. However, the third year, you're really on the front line whenever you're on the 911 call center. And that's where, you could really get a good feel for what kind of person, what kind of employee that we would be kind of dealing with. And this pathway, I believe, could really give exposure and also, a way for potential police officers in the future to get a taste for what it would be like to deal with the public on a day-to-day basis. And we would also have that empirical data in terms of, attendance and all that other information that would be important. Just as I believe Captain Beitzel had mentioned at the last meeting, we could maybe give them a few extra points along the way in terms of, if they've completed this path, if you will. Even expanding perhaps even to say the hospitals, let's bring them in and talk to them. They have security on their premises. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I hope the administration isn't in favor of pursuing this. I believe they're going to be because this could be a way where we could really recruit a little bit earlier. So that's my report kind of thing.
That's a great idea. Jeff, what do you think about, and you all chime in if you have any thoughts on this, what you said about them going in and starting the process early and creating a pathway for younger people, because I know there's the thing with Akron Public Schools where they have these different academies and things going on at all the different schools. But even outside of, if we were able to bring them in at part-time at maybe Parks and Rec 311, 911, even a step further, because we have this partnership with Stark State where city employees can go there. Maybe, they have the senior to sophomore program in the high schools, maybe coming up with a program where we can have these individuals who are interested in the police academy being able to go to Stark State and getting that associate's degree in counseling or social work, because they do have that program there, because there seems to be this national cry for there to be social workers involved now. And now we have a police officer who actually has a social worker background. So we're getting a 2-for-1. I think that's something, if we could talk about that a little bit, maybe kicking that can down the road and unpack that and seeing how that would work. Because not only are we getting ourselves someone who's invested early in life, they have that extra tool that seems to be the thing that everyone is talking about, is making sure that if we have someone going on a call with someone with having a mental health issue, you have someone there who is trained in that area, instead of us having to go out and bringing in an outside person who has no police training. To me, that concerns me a little bit of putting someone in harm's way maybe. But if you have an officer who actually has that training, I think that's something we should talk about, especially with us having this agreement with Stark State.
I love that idea. I think that's brilliant. And I think, something like that. And I don't know, this is a bigger conversation with a lot, many more who's a lot smarter than me. But, like if maybe whenever they take the test, if they have that kind of training, that degree, maybe we give them a couple more points.
That's right.
And that kind of makes sense to me, but I want to hear other voices because I don't know. Like I said, I really honestly don't know, but I think this idea, starting earlier versus later, you know, and creating that pathway for the young ones, I think it could be successful. And I know Brad and I have talked about it at length several times, and I know he has some good ideas on this as well.
And so moving on a little further, when we talk about culture, if one of you could chime in on how are you all dealing with a lot of the unrest that's going on right now in the country, and how are you guys dealing with that as a police force and being able to maneuver those things? Because I know there has to be tension. There's tension all over the world right now. How are you guys handling that as a department, and where do you see areas where there may be some room for improvement where we could come in and sort of help with that? Anyone? Anyone?
Captain Beitzel, maybe you're closer to that one with the patrol shifts. Give us some kind of an idea how you guys approach
Right.
that.
I was trying to unmute. I couldn't figure it out for a second. I think that the way that or I could say I'm dealing with it on my shift is just by having a open communication. We talk about it. You know, everybody's concerns. There are, to be quite honest, you know, the guys are, and I use that term generically, a concern that, you know, honestly, if something happens where they have to use force out on the street to save their life or someone else's, there is that concern, as there would be for pretty much probably every police officer in the country right now, that they may not be supported, or it may turn into something that it actually isn't. So there is that concern, but I do believe that, you know, they have the best training that we can give them, and they know that. They also know that they're supported. The department supports them. But I'm not going to lie, it's tough right now to come to work every day with a really positive attitude and have that project outward. I haven't, you know, one thing I will say about Akron community, and this is a positive that I love this about our city, is that the guys tell me daily how often somebody will stop them and just say, thank you for what you do. Or somebody will buy them a cup of coffee, or maybe pay for their meal. Or, I mean, there's far, far, far more of that is going on every single day out there than there is the negative. And so I think at first, when this whole thing first, you know, a lot of this negativity jumped off, they were a lot more apprehensive, but more now, they're talking about the positive interactions they're having and the things that we're doing. Today, I sent 2 of my officers out with boxes of the snacks and the drinks to do the Snacks with a Cop program, and they were excited to do it. And they've been texting me, you know, the interactions that they've had and how they appreciated the opportunity to be able to have and create those opportunities to have positive interactions. So, you know, we could focus on the negative, but I think that we here choose to focus on the positive, and there's far more of that to focus on anyway. And so that's what I think that we're doing. At least I can tell you that's what my shift is doing, and I believe that that's what everyone else is doing too. Akron's a great city. They support their police department, and they've shown it every single day.
That's good to know. I see a lot of the community support there, but my concern is more in-house. How are you officers dealing with that? Because, you know, it has to be tough. I don't know if there's room for racial sensitivity training in this, but I think it's something that goes on both ends. You know, a lot of times when people hear racial sensitivity, they think that we want to have everybody come into class and we have to teach them about Black people. And this is more than just, we have to teach each other about all people, about all of us, because we all come from different places, and it has to be very difficult right now in-house dealing with that. And is there any kind of conversation? Maybe Lieutenant Fike can talk about that a little bit, about bringing in someone to talk to them about those things, those isms that seem to be affecting you all definitely, but this country as a whole.
I can jump in on this one. Hey, Lieutenant, if that's okay.
It's fine. You taught the class.
Okay, so we began planning our in-service for this year way back in the spring. Actually, these recruits were still in the academy when we started this. And one of the things that we had already had on the syllabus for that in-service training was implicit bias and procedural justice, which is basically building partnerships with the community. These are things that we routinely do at Akron on a regular basis. Now, we did not have in-service last year due to COVID, but we routinely do these things to remind our officers where we stand, how we need to work with the community, building those partnerships, and basically just keeping that good relationship that Captain Beitzel spoke about, keeping that good relationship. And it's apparent that it does work here in Akron because we've seen less incidents of violence during the protests where we don't see that other places around the country. And then, we go through that bias training. By the way, anybody from City Council is welcome to come and sit in if you'd like to see it. You can contact the training bureau. We'll give you the dates and times that you can come down.
That's good to know. That's why these conversations are so good, because this is you all's world, and I think it's very important for us to really understand it before we try to say this is what you need to do to fix it. Because a lot of these things, I'm sure we were unaware of and not privy to, and I think it's a good starting point for us.
Tara, can I buzz in?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, please do.
And even setting culture in the police department, it really starts for us at the recruitment and background phase, because my recruiters and my background officers go to implicit bias training. They are told what values that we are looking for and character we're looking for in the officers that we're recruiting, and then we're doing backgrounds on. We try to teach in the training class the principles and values of this department. It's matter of fact, in the training room, if you go to training room, it's up there and they see it every day in class. And then from oversight, because I'm an officer of professional standards and accountability, when we see something on body worn camera, when we're doing a review, and it's not the way we should be conducting ourselves, we give feedback. We try to change behavior. And I think that's important in setting a culture. I'm timing on that.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, is it mandatory, like every year or every other year, or voluntary in terms of the implicit bias training?
No, the in-service training itself is not mandated by the state unless it's a CPT, basically continuing education. And usually what happens when that is the case, the state will set out funding to cover the officer's shift while they're at training. Our in-service is usually designed and mandated internally by the police department, so every officer must attend. And including this time, even reserve officers have attended. We also have officers from Monroe Falls who have been coming in because their chief heard about it and wanted them to attend the class also.
Good, thank you.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I've been looking through a lot of information, trying to get a little bit more about training. That seems to be the thing that people they think is needed. More training, better train. I think our training is really good, but when I look at the state itself, I've seen where OPADA's cut many trainers. I'm not really sure why this is happening. It seems from what I've read that they're bringing outside people in, like guest trainers. That kind of bothers me because I look at that and I think this is somebody who's just coming in for this class. It's not somebody who's worked with this organization doing things. So my question, when I looked at, it seems like really for the last couple of years, there hasn't been a lot of money from the state. So it looks like The only thing that's really the state's been consistent with is just recertification with firearms, and really not a whole lot with other aspects of training. So I guess what I'm saying here is we're writing our own curriculum where we really don't have a standard statewide department that they can go by, where we have a certain type of standard. It may vary from department to department if the state's not really taking a lead on this, it seems. Anybody want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'll weigh in on that. You're right that the state standards are lacking. They set a standard for the basic training academy as to the number of hours for each topic area. What they have not done recently is mandated certain training outside of that. So we are on our own. We haven't had a state requirement for continuing professional training for 3 years. 2016 was the last time they mandated. And within it, there's very few standards in terms of what certifies a person to do certain jobs. That's up to the departments to decide. There were programs within OPATA, for instance, for Master Criminal Investigator, Master Crime Scene Tech. Those still exist. However, with COVID and some budget issues, they have shut down Richfield, which was a main training facility for us. And we were able to not only send our people there at a very reasonable cost, we're paying for the course and that's it. We didn't have travel costs involved because it's so close by. And all of those instructors were top notch. They let all those instructors go as part of those cuts. And now the only place we can send them is to the London campus, which is a good drive away. And we have to pay for overnight accommodations for them now in hotels because they also shut down the campus dormitories. So it makes it very expensive for us. And from a standpoint where I'm sitting trying to manage the training budget, it is going to be quite a challenge going into 21 to get as many courses in because we're paying such high travel costs. The state also, we're running into a problem with certain courses that are required to certify an instructor for the basic academy, for example. We have not really filled out our cadre for academy instructors as well as we would like to keep our costs down. And so we're going to OPATA to get those classes in so that those instructors could teach additional topic areas. But with them shut down, now we don't know where to go to get that. And the state hasn't even been forthright with what courses could you go to be certified for certain topic areas. So it does create a challenge. We're still moving through that. We're doing the best we can. But moving forward, you talk about, we would prefer to have more training. Even our in-service is half of what we would like it to be, but because of cost, there's only so much we can do. And in this case, we really are going to cut the number of courses we send people to in 2021, not because we want to, but even if we spend the same amount of money, we're spending it significantly more for travel costs because we don't have Richfield. It's a state problem. It's not ours. We set a high standard for our own people and expect them to have a high level of knowledge. And we look for every opportunity to improve that knowledge and that skill set. But we're limited on where we can go to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate the information on that because as I followed the cuts and so on, I felt that would be a real concern for training. I assume at times you may have officers who pay for their own training and take their own personal time to be able to attend from time to time.
So I'm a little taken aback by the fact that OPATA is the only place that our officers can go for training. Now that you guys have in-house, is there any conversation being had about maybe you guys can bring instructors in-house for
Yeah, you know what?
as a continuing education course that they have to participate in?
So maybe I should clarify that. They're not the only place. They were the authoritative place, and they were cost effective, but they're not the only ones. We routinely bring in outside courses into our academy, instructors and particular vendors or particular organizations that teach other classes. We bring them into our academy, and we're working on doing a little bit more of that next year, so that we have the opportunity to have a few seats in the class, and they can use our facility. And it's an even swap. Opana is not the only place, but they are the biggest place, and they were the bulk of our catalog of classes, if you will. So we are having to go outside of that little bubble and look for other classes. But the other thing that we need to be careful on, and we need to be concerned about, is we want to make sure that where we're sending them, that curriculum is something we want to do. Okay, so with Opana, we're very clear on what we're getting for the money, what we're getting when we send somebody to that class. With some of these other vendors that we might not know as well, we might not have that same level of knowledge. And so we need to send somebody there first to evaluate it. Usually it's a member of our training staff to evaluate the course and the instructors and determine whether what they're teaching and what you get out of it is what we expect from our officers in Akron, and it meets up with the way we do things here. So that's the biggest difference, is that some of the outside folks we don't know as well, and we're not as comfortable with, and we traditionally up to this point have had Opana that provided us with an awful lot of opportunities there, and that's just reduced now.
Okay, that clarity definitely helps a lot. Thank you for that. I don't want to keep us too much longer, but I have another question really quick for Sergeant Armstead about procedural justice as part of your implicit bias training. Explain to me a little bit about what that procedural justice course is, what it entails.
The procedural justice is basically it's the procedures by which police departments that they use in order to enforce the law. In other words, it goes off of the social contract, which means that the citizens give us authority to enforce the law, but they expect certain things in return, like one, law enforcement, but two, they expect us to manage problems in the community. Police legitimacy is the bigger topic there, and what police legitimacy is where the community sees your police department, our police department here in Akron, as being legitimate. And they see us being legitimate by the things we do that are right, meaning things like acts of service, professionalism, being courteous, those type of things. The things that we typically see on TV, and the ones that are truly bad instances of police behavior are the ones that sort of take away from that authority. So what we do is we teach we instruct the officers that your authority is finite, and it comes from the people you serve. So it's kind of like, don't bite the hand that feeds you, for lack of a better term. We have to work to build these relationships with the community, because at times we're going to need help from the community. And a good example of that is when we're trying to solve homicides. Here in Akron, our solve rate for homicide is very high. Part of that reason is because we have a good relationship with the community. If you think about some other major urban areas or metropolitan areas, they don't have that. And it's because nobody wants to talk to the police. They don't trust the police. We work here to keep that level of trust up in Akron.
Okay. So when you're teaching this course, has there been any thoughts about bringing maybe some community stakeholders in during that course work with the officers? I don't mean just pastors, because everybody always wants to just run and get the pastors. I'm talking about people in the community, people who are out here, you know, doing the work, whether they're activists or there's somebody out here with a nonprofit that's really putting in work inside these communities. Not to say our pastors aren't, but it seems like we always want to just use the pastors for that when we have a broader reach than just them, that I think that we should be trying to utilize when we talk about implicit biases and procedural justice.
I will say that no, that hasn't been really considered. I will tell you that the biggest issue with that is an issue of time.
Time.
Like Captain McCosey said, you know, we don't have as much time as we'd like to have to focus on training. So we have to manage those opportunities as best we can. We have 2 hours to do the implicit bias and police legitimacy. This year, an entire day of in-service was taken up by things that we had to do for recertification, such as driving, CPR, and firearms. That means that leaves 8 hours for instruction for legal updates, CPR, those types of things. So there was very limited time. It'd be very difficult for us to have someone come in sometimes twice a week for 24 weeks. 24 weeks is how long in service goes to be able to maintain that level of instruction for each and every person in the department to make it consistent for all.
Okay, got it, understood. And I have one last question, then I'll yield to my my colleagues for anything that they want to close with. This question may be for Captain McCosey. When you were talking about OPATA, I was just thinking to myself, I know you probably have a lot of officers who are OPATA certified. So if that's something we can think about, maybe if we're already in-house and you already have officers who are OPATA certified, and there has to be some kind of training or continuing education coursework, if we're already in-house and have people who are certified in-house, maybe we should think about saving some money and keeping all of this in-house if we already have the people who are certified in those areas. Just a thought, something we can think about.
Thank you. We do develop some courses in-house, and like the in-service courses that Sergeant Armstead and Sergeant Wood had mentioned. Those courses are actually done in-house. Those are done by our folks that have years of experience in doing what they're doing, and they put together the courses based on the latest best practices and what meets up with our standards and expectations. We're even doing advanced courses now, and in fact, there's one coming up that Lieutenant Forney and his staff have put together that we're going to finish up and put out there. We are doing those things. Most particularly, it's the in-service that we're concerned about because we really want those guys, our people across the entire department, to have good, consistent training and more of it. And we can develop those courses. That's not a problem. But the OPATA certification really comes down to who can teach in the academies. And that's not something that we get to decide. That's up to the OPATA to decide. And as a part of this whole shift and changes with their system, we're gonna have to navigate those waters a little bit. But that's a little bit different than the normal in-service classes and whatnot.
Thank you. Councilman McKittrick or Councilman Fusco, do you guys have anything to add as we close out here?
No, I'd just like to, again, say thank you to everyone who's been on this meeting. And please, by all means, reach out with regards to anything that was said tonight. We'll do our best to work with you all, and appreciate what you do every day. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Councilman McKittrick, you don't have anything? You good?
No, I just the same. I just want to thank everybody for their input and a little bit more information I have regarding what's going on with the state level. And I know that our training is very consistent here at home, but I just wish that there would be a little more consistent guidance statewide, so we'd have a little bit more consistency from department to department. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank you all. Before I do all that, do you all have anything to say before we close out this meeting? No? Going once, going twice? No? I just want to thank you all personally for your time. I know that you all have the weight of the world on your shoulders right now, but just remember there's more of us for you than against you. And I think what we're doing here, we very well may be able to set a standard that can be followed across the state and in other municipalities. And that is the end goal here, is making sure that we have a template that other people will mirror across the state, so they can have just as good as a police force as we do. So thank you all. And that'll be it for the evening. Jeff and Brad, if you guys could stay on really quick, is that possible? Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
So we do need to stay live.
Oh yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Thanks.
So if we could, somewhere down the road, I know everything has to be these public meetings, if we could talk a little bit more about, because I don't want our meetings to get redundant with them and us to keep talking about the same stuff, is I think we really need to look and dive into this thing with them about the structure of their hiring. After talking to quite a few of the officers myself, there's nothing wrong with their hiring process. I think they just need to probably change the way that they're doing certain things. Like if they're taking the test and they pass the test and then they're invited to do the physical fitness exam, I think there should be a drug screening before they even do that. Because to me, I think we're wasting man hours because we're doing a physical test. I mean, if they fail the drug test, they can't take the, it just doesn't make any sense to me that we wouldn't do a drug test before we invite them to a physical fitness exam. And then the thing with the HR background checks with the, I think we really need to talk about this credit thing, because someone, just because they have bad credit doesn't mean they're going to be a bad officer. I think we really need to talk about if there's an issue with their credit, what do we do to make sure we can get them credit worthy, but to just disqualify them because somebody did some little silly stuff when they were 20, but now they're 30 and they've got themselves together. I think we may be missing a lot of good people in that. And within that background check, I think we honestly need to do these psychological evaluations before we even get to the point of offering them a position, because that's a lot of money involved right there in itself. We've done all this work, we've got HR involved, but if someone's agility and their mental state is not where it needs to be, I don't want to say we wasted our time on this person, but we've probably lost some other people along the way that we probably could have given a second look to if someone is not mentally fit to be here. So I think we probably need to really unpack that part of the process as it relates to personnel. And I don't know where is that civil service part, or if that's something we talk to I don't know, Don about or Chief about, but it really concerns me when I have so many people saying that this credit thing is disqualifying people. Right now, half of America has filed unemployment. So we get to the point that we want to bring somebody in who really wants to be an officer, but because we've had this craziness of COVID and people have lost their jobs and they can't pay bills and they're trying to stay. I just really think we're going to really do ourselves a disservice if we keep letting this credit be a factor and whether we want to hire somebody or not. And lastly, this misdemeanor thing. How we as Black people handle things, I think, is a lot different than the way maybe you all would handle things growing up. And I think a lot of times when they look at those misdemeanor backgrounds, they look at it and say, oh no, we can't hire this person. But maybe if they've passed the test and they've passed the drug screening and they've passed the physical fitness part, but oh, they've got this misdemeanor here, I think we need to be bringing those individuals in and having a conversation with them and saying, okay, look, right here when you were 25, it shows you had a disorderly conduct and you had marijuana on you. Explain to us what happened in your life at that point where you made this decision. And if there hasn't been an infraction since then, I think that speaks to that person may have learned something from there. But I think that when we look at these drop-offs that I heard in one of the meetings the other day of how many people dropped off after putting in an application, that has something to do with this process here. They didn't just decide they didn't want to be a police officer. There was something in this process that made them feel like they weren't worthy enough or they wouldn't get past a certain point. Of course, if they can't get past a drug screening on number 2, it is what it is at that point. But if it's something that happened long ago in their background, I think we need to really look at that.
Weigh in on just a few things.
Yes, please.
You're aware I worked with the fire department. Well, 21 of the years I worked in the fire investigation unit. So I was deeply involved with not the recruiting aspect, but the actual backgrounds and so on. And I can tell you that some of the ones that came off of that list may have made that decision because of knowing they may not be able to pass the drug test, and they may have decided not to go take the test because of that. And I can speak of that from experience from the past working with that. The OPATA, the physical ability, all of that is required by OPATA to be certified as a police officer. So when they do it generally when that's done, as soon as they're finished, they drug test them. So I think they are trying to save money because at that point, that's why they do it both at the same time. So they're not having to have people scheduled for multiple different times, like go get drug tested, then go do your physical ability. They try to do everything combined like that. And I can say from experience when we've had the physical agility test, when it was finished and they say, please go over here into this room and you're going to be drug tested. We've had people just keep on walking down the hall out the door and leave and never see them again. So with that aspect, that's one part of it. But the other issue, when you were talking about the credit, I don't think that they're disqualified so much because of having poor credit, as much so as when they fill out their questionnaire, because they're given a pre-employment questionnaire, it shows dishonesty. And that's what we've seen where we ask somebody, list all your creditors, list any problems you've had, and they fail to do that, not just maybe miss one or two things. Same thing when we do a social security request, it'll actually show where they've actually worked. And we've had candidates that omitted that and they say, well, gee, I was only there 2 weeks, but then you find out that they were only there 2 weeks because they stole from the company or something like that. So there are tools to speak of the character of them, whether, and I don't think it's so much that their credit's poor, whether they were honest about why it had happened.
Okay. Now, do you know if they're using the same process in the hiring of police officers? Because my understanding is there's a gap between the physical fitness test and the drug screening. So I'm not sure if fire is doing theirs a little differently, but I think that's something we may need to find out, because if we can compact them into one thing, I think that would be great. If that's how it is over in fire, it should be the same over in police. but my understanding there's a little gap in between the two. And to me, we can get people through the process quicker if we're just putting them together. And if someone knows that, you know, when you come for your physical fitness, there will be a drug screening there right after, immediately following. We'll know right then and there. If you've got 200 people who are supposed to show up, but only 175 show up, we already know why the other 25 didn't show up. But I just think just to keep us from spending that extra money and just compacting that time and that scheduling and getting people through this process and doing it in a way that is a lot more efficient, I think is important for us to do, where it won't put so much anxiety, not only on the people who are doing all the labor on the end of it, but that person who wants to be a potential candidate as well.
And just for your information, they're going to go forward now with fire recruits will be polygraphed. They never were in the past. It's really a great tool to be able to get some accurate information when you're looking to hire people. So this will be the first time in fire that they'll be doing it, but they've done those regularly over the years with police recruits.
Yeah, that part I think is definitely a necessary tool, especially when you're dealing in these kind of positions with the public. Absolutely. I'm just more concerned about if we're losing good candidates because of the way the process is being handled over in one department as versus the other. And I think they should mirror each other because they're both dealing with the community. They're both police and fire are still public safety. And I think that they should probably be doing things probably the same way.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Welcome. Have a good night.